The letter arrived at sunset, slipped under Flora Jensen's boarding house door with such force that it skidded across the worn floorboards and stopped at her feet while she stood washing dishes in a tin basin. Flora wiped her hands on her apron and bent to retrieve the folded paper, her heart already quickening because nothing good ever came delivered like that in Red Cloud, Nebraska in the summer of 1881. The words were brief and brutal, written in Sheriff Marston's distinctive slashing handwriting that she recognized from wanted posters around town. Miss Jensen, you have until sunrise tomorrow to leave Red Cloud. If you remain past dawn, you will be arrested and tried for crimes against public morality. This is your only warning. Her hands trembled as she read the words again, then a third time, each reading making them no less real. The tin cup she had been washing slipped from her other hand and clattered into the basin, sending soapy water splashing across her blue calico dress. Outside her window, the Nebraska prairie stretched endlessly, golden wheat fields rippling under the late August sun, beautiful and merciless all at once. She had lived in this town for 3 months, arriving on the train from Omaha with nothing but a carpetbag and hopes for a fresh start after her father's debts had consumed everything they owned back east. The boarding house had been her salvation, a small establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Hutchinson who needed help with cooking and cleaning in exchange for room and board. Flora had thought herself safe here, anonymous in this railroad town of barely 800 souls. But then Benjamin Colt, the wealthiest rancher in the county and Sheriff Marston's brother, had started visiting the boarding house dining room more frequently. He had made his intentions clear last week, cornering her in the pantry and proposing marriage in a tone that suggested refusal was not an option he had considered. When Flora had politely declined, explaining she had no interest in matrimony at present, Benjamin's face had darkened like storm clouds gathering over the prairie. "You will regret this," he had said, his breath hot against her ear. "My family built this town. We decide who stays and who goes." Now, holding the sheriff's ultimatum, Flora understood the full weight of that threat. She sank onto the narrow bed in her small room under the eaves, the paper crumpling in her fist. Where could she possibly go? She had no money for train fare, no family to take her in, no prospects in any other town. The injustice of it burned in her chest like swallowed fire. She had done nothing wrong except exist as a woman who dared to refuse a powerful man. A knock at her door made her jump. "Flora, dear." Mrs. Hutchinson's voice carried concern. "May I come in?" "Yes, madam." The older woman entered, her face lined with worry beneath her gray bun. "I just saw the sheriff leaving. What did he want?" Flora handed her the letter silently. Mrs. Hutchinson read it, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Those Marston boys," she said finally. "They think they own this whole county. I am sorry, child. I would fight this if I could, but Benjamin holds the deed to this property. If I harbor you against the sheriff's orders, he will take my house." "I understand." Flora's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I would never ask you to risk your home for me." "There is someone who might help you," Mrs. Hutchinson said slowly. "Quentin Bradford. He has a ranch about 10 miles north of here. He and the Marstons have been at odds for years over water rights and land boundaries. If anyone in this county would stand up to them, it would be Quentin." "Why would he help a stranger?" Mrs. Hutchinson smiled sadly. "Quentin Bradford has a reputation for helping people the Marstons have wronged. He is a good man, Flora. Difficult and proud, certainly, but good. If you ride out tonight, you could reach his ranch before midnight." "I do not have a horse." "Take my mare. She is old but steady. Consider her a gift." Mrs. Hutchinson pressed something into Flora's hand. When Flora looked down, she saw $3 silver. "It is all I can spare, but it is yours." Tears burned Flora's eyes. "I cannot take your money." "You can and you will. Now pack your things quickly. The longer you wait, the more dangerous this becomes. If Sheriff Marston decides to arrest you tonight instead of waiting for dawn, even Quentin Bradford might not be able to help you." An hour later, Flora rode north under a sky blazing with stars, her few possessions tied in a bundle behind the saddle. The mare's hooves made soft rhythmic thuds against the dirt road, and the night air carried the sweet smell of prairie grass and distant water. She had never ridden alone at night before, and every shadow seemed to hide potential danger. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and once she heard the haunting scream of a mountain lion that made her blood run cold. But she kept riding because what choice did she have? Return to Red Cloud and face arrest on false charges? Try to make it to another town on foot with $3 to her name? At least this way, heading toward Quentin Bradford's ranch, she had a sliver of hope, however thin. The ranch buildings materialized out of the darkness like a mirage, solid and real. A two-story house with a wraparound porch, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals that held dark shapes she assumed were horses. Light glowed in one downstairs window. Flora dismounted on shaking legs and approached the porch, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Before she could knock, the door swung open. A man stood silhouetted against the lamplight, tall and broad-shouldered, holding a rifle pointed at the ground but ready. "State your business." Flora's mouth went dry. "I am looking for Quentin Bradford." "You found him. Now answer my question." "My name is Flora Jensen. I work at Mrs. Hutchinson's boarding house in Red Cloud. The sheriff gave me until sunrise to leave town, and Mrs. Hutchinson said you might help me." The rifle lowered slightly. "Come into the light where I can see you properly." Flora stepped forward, lifting her chin despite her fear. The lamplight revealed Quentin Bradford's face clearly now. He looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to hold their own light. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a dangerous look that his current expression of skeptical assessment did nothing to soften. "What did you do to earn Sheriff Marston's attention?" he asked. "I refused to marry his brother Benjamin." Quentin's eyes narrowed, and something that might have been anger flickered across his features. "That sounds like the Marstons. Come inside. You look half dead on your feet." The interior of the house surprised her with its comfort and cleanliness. Braided rugs covered polished wood floors, and the furniture, while simple, was well made and carefully maintained. Books lined shelves on one wall. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace despite the warm night. "Sit," Quentin commanded, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "I will make coffee." Flora sank gratefully into the chair, exhaustion hitting her now that she had stopped moving. She watched Quentin move efficiently around the kitchen area, his movements economical and sure. He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and brought them over, settling into the chair opposite hers. "Tell me everything," he said. So she did, starting with her arrival in Red Cloud 3 months ago and ending with Mrs. Hutchinson sending her here. Quentin listened without interrupting, his blue eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her acutely aware of how disheveled she must look after her midnight ride. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "The Marstons have been running roughshod over this county for 20 years, he said finally. "Ever since their father struck it rich with cattle contracts during the war. They think they can control every person and every piece of land from here to the Republican River. Most people are too afraid or too dependent on them to fight back. But not you." His smile was grim. "My father bought this land in 1867, before the Marstons expanded north. They have been trying to force me out ever since, using every legal and illegal trick they can devise. Water rights lawsuits, fence cutting, cattle rustling, even trying to frame my ranch hands for crimes they did not commit. But I am still here, and I intend to stay here. I am not asking you to fight my battle, Flora said quietly. I just need a place to stay for a few days while I figure out where to go next. I can work for my keep. I am good with cooking, cleaning, mending. I can help with animals if you show me what to do. Quentin studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. If you stay here, even for a few days, the Marstons will hear about it. They will assume I am harboring you specifically to spite them. It will escalate the conflict between us. Flora's heart sank. I understand. I am sorry to have troubled you. She started to rise, though she had no idea where she would go. Sit down, Quentin said, his voice softer. I did not say I would not help you. I am just making sure you understand what you are getting into. If you stay here, Sheriff Marston will likely ride out with some of his men. There might be trouble, violence even. I can protect you, but I need to know you are prepared for what might come. Flora met his eyes steadily. What other choice do I have? Return to Red Cloud and let them drive me out with nothing? Try to survive on the prairie alone with $3. At least here I have a chance. At least here someone is willing to stand beside me against injustice. Something shifted in Quentin's expression, a softening around his eyes. You have courage. I will give you that. He stood, setting his cup aside. There is a spare room upstairs. It is not fancy, but the bed is clean and the door has a lock. You can stay as long as you need to. In the morning, we will figure out a more permanent solution to your problem. Thank you, Flora whispered, overwhelmed by his unexpected kindness. I will not forget this. Thank me when the Marstons are not threatening to arrest you, Quentin said dryly. But there was warmth beneath the words, a hint of something that made Flora's pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The spare room was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the prairie and a quilt on the bed that looked handmade. Flora collapsed onto the mattress without even removing her dusty dress, asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of frying bacon. For a moment, she could not remember where she was. Then the previous night came flooding back, and she sat up quickly, her heart racing. What time was it? Had she slept past sunrise? Was she now a fugitive from Red Cloud's law? She hurried downstairs to find Quentin at the stove, cooking breakfast with the same efficient competence he had shown making coffee. He glanced at her and smiled slightly. Good morning. It is about 8 o'clock. You officially defied the sheriff's orders 2 hours ago. How does it feel to be an outlaw? Despite everything, Flora found herself smiling back. Surprisingly normal. I expected to feel more dangerous. Give it time. Coffee is on the table. Breakfast will be ready in a few minutes. After we eat, I will show you around the ranch and explain what needs doing if you are serious about working. Over breakfast, bacon and eggs and fresh bread that Quentin admitted he had bought in town yesterday, Flora learned more about the man who had taken her in. He had inherited the ranch from his father 5 years ago and had been running it alone ever since, except for 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse and helped with the cattle. He raised beef cattle and a few horses, enough to make a decent living but not enough to compete with the Marston Empire. Why do the Marstons want your land so badly? Flora asked, mopping up egg yolk with a piece of bread. Creek runs through my property, Quentin explained. Reliable water year-round. Benjamin wants to expand his herd, but he needs more water access to do it. He has tried to buy me out 6 times. When I refused to sell, he started making trouble. How long can you hold out against them? Quentin's jaw tightened. As long as it takes. This land is mine by legal deed. My father's bones are buried on that hill behind the barn. I am not giving it up because some greedy rancher wants to build an empire. The fierce pride in his voice stirred something in Flora's chest, a warmth that spread through her like sunlight. She had never met anyone who stood so firmly against injustice, who refused to bend even when bending would be easier. It made her want to be braver herself, to stop running and start fighting. After breakfast, Quentin showed her around the ranch. She met his two hands, a grizzled older man named Pete and a younger fellow named Sam, both of whom tipped their hats politely but looked curious about her presence. Quentin explained the situation briefly, and both men nodded their understanding without judgment. "Marstons will not like this," Pete observed, spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. "Expect them to come calling soon." "Let them come," Quentin said calmly. "Miss Jensen is under my protection now. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." The simple declaration made Flora's throat tight. She turned away quickly, pretending to examine the nearest horse so the men would not see the tears that had suddenly blurred her vision. When had anyone ever protected her? When had anyone ever stood between her and the world's casual cruelties? Quentin set her to work helping with domestic tasks around the ranch house, cooking meals for the hands, mending torn shirts and worn socks, cleaning and organizing. The work was hard but satisfying, and Flora threw herself into it gratefully, needing the distraction. But always, in the back of her mind, she waited for the sound of approaching horses, for Sheriff Marston and his men to arrive demanding her surrender. The confrontation came on the third day. Flora was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard horses approaching fast. She dropped the wet shirt she had been hanging and ran around to the front, where Quentin was already standing on the porch, rifle in hand. Pete and Sam emerged from the barn, also armed. 6 riders approached, led by Sheriff Marston himself, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache and cold eyes. Benjamin Marston rode beside him, his handsome face twisted with anger. The other 4 men wore deputy badges but looked more like hired guns than lawmen. The riders stopped 20 feet from the porch. Sheriff Marston leaned forward in his saddle. "Quentin Bradford, you are harboring a fugitive from justice. Send Flora Jensen out here right now, and we will forget about any charges against you for obstruction." "Flora Jensen has committed no crime," Quentin said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "Your order for her to leave Red Cloud had no legal basis. You abused your authority at your brother's request because Miss Jensen refused his marriage proposal. That is not justice, Sheriff. That is tyranny." Benjamin Marston's face flushed dark red. "That woman is a troublemaker and a threat to public morality. She has no business in a decent town." "What exactly has she done that threatens public morality?" Quentin asked. "Please, enlighten us all." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Sheriff Marston said, "She refused a respectable offer of marriage and has been filling Mrs. Hutchinson's head with rebellious ideas about women's rights and independence. We do not need that kind of influence in Red Cloud. So her crime is having opinions you disagree with and making her own choices about her life." Quentin's voice dripped contempt. "That is the law you are upholding, Sheriff? The law that says women must marry men they do not want or face exile. Send her out, Bradford, or we will come in and get her." Quentin raised his rifle, not quite pointing it at the sheriff but making his readiness clear. Pete and Sam did the same. "You are welcome to try, Sheriff. But understand that if you set foot on my property without a legitimate warrant, you will be trespassing. And I have the legal right to defend my land against trespassers, even ones wearing badges." Flora's heart pounded so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. She stepped forward, unable to let Quentin risk his life for her. "I am here, Sheriff. I am not hiding." "Flora, get back inside," Quentin said without taking his eyes off the riders. "I will not let you die because of me. No one is dying today unless these men force the issue." Quentin's voice remained steady, but Flora heard the steel beneath it. "Sheriff, you have a choice to make. Ride away now and forget about this manufactured grudge against Miss Jensen, or start a gunfight that will leave men dead and force the territorial governor to investigate what happened here. Because I promise you, if shots are fired, I will make sure the whole territory knows how you abused your office to punish a woman for rejecting your brother. Benjamin Marston pulled his pistol. You arrogant son of a Benjamin, no. Sheriff Marston grabbed his brother's arm. Put it away. He is insulting our family. He is also right. The words came out like they tasted bitter. If we start shooting, the governor will send marshals. They will investigate. They will discover the truth. Sheriff Marston glared at Quentin with pure hatred. You win this round, Bradford. But this is not over. That woman sets foot in Red Cloud. She gets arrested. And next time we have business, you better be ready for consequences. The riders wheeled their horses and galloped away, leaving dust hanging in the morning air. Flora's legs nearly gave out from the release of tension. Quentin lowered his rifle and turned to her, his blue eyes blazing. I told you to get back inside, he said, but there was no heat in the words. I could not hide while you risked yourself. That is exactly what I need you to do when dangerous men show up with guns. He set the rifle aside and gripped her shoulders gently. Flora, I meant what I said. You are under my protection. But I cannot protect you if you do not let me. Being this close to him, feeling the warmth of his hands through her dress, made Flora's breath catch. I am not used to anyone protecting me. I am used to fighting my own battles. Then get used to it, Quentin said softly. His hands slid down her arms and fell away, leaving her skin tingling where he had touched. At least while you are here, you do not have to fight alone. Over the following weeks, Flora settled into life at the ranch with surprising ease. She cooked meals that made the ranch hands groan with pleasure, mended everything that needed mending, kept the house cleaner than it had been in years according to Pete's assessment, and even helped with the horses when extra hands were needed. She discovered she had a natural way with animals, especially the half-wild colt Quentin was trying to break for saddle work. Talk to him, Quentin instructed one afternoon as they worked with the colt in the corral. Let him hear your voice and associate it with calm feelings. Flora approached the nervous animal slowly, murmuring soft nonsense words. The colt's ears swiveled toward her, and after a moment, he stretched his neck to sniff her outstretched hand. She touched his nose gently, then his neck, stroking the sleek coat while continuing her low, soothing monologue. You are a natural, Quentin said, genuine admiration in his voice. He stood close beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body in the September sunshine. I have been working with this fellow for 2 weeks, and he is just now starting to trust me. You won him over in 10 minutes. Maybe he likes my voice better than yours, Flora teased, surprising herself with the flirtation. Quentin's answering smile made her pulse race. Maybe he does. I know I do. The air between them seemed to thicken. Flora became acutely aware of every point where their bodies nearly touched, the few inches of space separating them feeling both vast and non-existent. Quentin's hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not move, he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Flora, he said, his voice rough, I need to tell you something. What? I am falling in love with you. Have been since the night you rode up to my door, exhausted and afraid but still brave enough to ask a stranger for help. I know the timing is terrible. I know you have been through hell and the last thing you need is me complicating your life further. But I cannot keep pretending I feel nothing when every time I look at you, my heart feels like it might burst. Flora's breath stopped entirely. She stared at him, at the strong, proud man who had risked everything for her, who made her laugh and made her feel safe and made her want things she had never let herself want before. Quentin, You do not have to say anything, he interrupted quickly. I just needed you to know. No expectations, no pressure. Your place here is secure regardless of how you feel about me. I want you to understand that. Let me finish, Flora said gently. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I was going to say that I am falling in love with you too. I think I started that first night, when you stood there with your rifle and your suspicion but still invited me inside because it was the right thing to do. Every day since then, working beside you, watching how you treat people with kindness and defend what is right even when it is hard, I have fallen more and more. You scare me, Quentin Bradford. Not because you are dangerous, but because you make me want to stay in one place for the first time in my life. You make me want to build something instead of running. Quentin's face transformed, hope and joy blazing across his features. You mean that? Every word. He kissed her then, soft and careful at first, as if she might break. But when Flora wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, the kiss deepened, becoming something fierce and desperate and full of longing. The colt snorted and trotted away, forgotten. Nothing existed except the two of them, finally admitting what had been building since the beginning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, Flora laughed, giddy and overwhelmed. We have known each other less than a month. I do not care. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Marry me, Flora. Let me spend the rest of my days making you happy. Let me give you the home and the safety and the love you deserve. She should say no. She should be practical, should wait, should protect her heart against potential hurt. But looking into Quentin's blue eyes, seeing the absolute sincerity there, Flora found she did not want to be practical. She wanted to be brave. She wanted to take this leap. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Quentin whooped with joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. Pete and Sam, who had been watching from the barn with poorly concealed interest, broke into applause and catcalls. Flora buried her burning face against Quentin's shoulder, but she could not stop smiling. They were married 2 weeks later by a traveling preacher who came through the area. Pete and Sam served as witnesses, along with Mrs. Hutchinson, who made the dangerous journey from Red Cloud despite the risk, because she would not miss seeing Flora happy after everything she had endured. The ceremony took place in front of the ranch house at sunset, the prairie glowing gold and amber around them. Flora wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Hutchinson had brought as a gift, and Quentin wore his best shirt with his dark hair slicked back. When he said his vows, his voice steady and sure, promising to love and cherish her for all his days, Flora felt tears slip down her cheeks. She had thought herself alone in the world, without family or future. Now she stood here holding the hands of a man who looked at her like she was everything he had ever wanted. I love you, she whispered when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. I will love you until the day I die, Quentin Bradford. I will hold you to that, he murmured back, then kissed her to the accompaniment of cheers and whistles from their small audience. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Mrs. Hutchinson had brought a cake, and Pete produced a bottle of whiskey from mysterious origins. They ate and drank and laughed as the stars came out overhead, brighter than Flora had ever seen them. When Mrs. Hutchinson finally left to make it back to Red Cloud before full dark, she hugged Flora tightly. You found your happiness, the older woman said. That is all I wanted for you, dear girl. I could not have done it without your help, Flora replied. Thank you for believing I deserved better than what Benjamin Marston offered. Every woman deserves the right to choose her own path. You just chose yours. Be happy, Flora. That night, alone with Quentin in the bedroom they would now share, Flora felt nervous for the first time since agreeing to marry him. He must have sensed it because he took her hands gently and said, We can take this as slow as you need. There is no rush. We have the rest of our lives. But Flora shook her head, her nervousness transforming into certainty. I want this. I want you. I am just new to feeling so much all at once. Quentin's smile was tender. Then let me show you. Let me love you the way you deserve. And he did, with patience and gentleness and passion that left Flora breathless. Later, lying wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she felt a completeness she had never experienced before. This was home, she realized. Not the house or the ranch or even Nebraska. Home was this man who had risked everything for her, who loved her with his whole fierce heart. What are you thinking about? Quentin asked, his fingers trailing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. How much my life has changed in 2 months. I went from being driven out of town as an undesirable to being married to the best man in Nebraska. Best man in Nebraska? His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. That is quite a claim. It is the truth. You are brave and kind and honorable. You stood up to the Marstons when everyone else was too afraid. You protected me when you had no reason to accept that it was the right thing to do. She propped herself up on her elbow to look at him properly. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that Mrs. Hutchinson sent me to you that night. Quentin's expression turned serious. I am the one who is grateful, Flora. You brought light into my life when I did not even realize I was living in darkness. This ranch was just work and duty before you came. Now it is a home. Now I have something worth fighting for beyond just pride and principle. We have each other worth fighting for, Flora corrected. Whatever comes, we face it together. Together, Quentin agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss. The Marstons tried one more time to cause trouble, 6 months after Flora and Quentin's wedding. Sheriff Marston showed up with a warrant for Quentin's arrest on falsified charges of cattle theft. But Quentin was prepared this time, with documentation proving his cattle's provenance and witness statements from other ranchers confirming the Marstons' pattern of making false accusations. When Quentin threatened to take the evidence to the territorial governor and file formal complaints of corruption and abuse of office, the Marstons finally backed down. The warrant disappeared, and Sheriff Marston stopped riding out to the Bradford ranch looking for trouble. Benjamin married a rancher's daughter from over in Kansas and moved away from Red Cloud, much to everyone's relief. Peace settled over the ranch like a warm blanket. Flora transformed the house into a true home, adding curtains and rugs and small touches that made every room more comfortable. She planted a garden that produced vegetables all summer and into the fall. She learned to ride well enough to help move cattle when needed, though she still preferred working with the horses. In the spring of 1882, Flora discovered she was pregnant. She told Quentin at breakfast one morning, simply saying, "I think we are going to need a bigger house soon." He looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned. "Flora, are you saying?" "I am saying we are going to have a baby. Probably in November if my calculations are correct." Quentin's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He leaped up from the table, swept her into his arms, and spun her around just like he had when she agreed to marry him. "We are having a baby. Flora, we are having a baby." "I know," she laughed, clinging to him. "I was there when it happened." Their son was born in November as predicted. A healthy baby boy with his father's blue eyes and a set of lungs that could wake the dead. They named him Thomas Bradford after Quentin's father, and he became the center of their universe in the way that firstborn children do. Flora had never known she could feel love like this, overwhelming and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Watching Quentin hold their son, seeing the wonder and tenderness on his face, made her fall in love with her husband all over again. He was patient with the baby's crying, changing diapers and walking the floor at midnight without complaint. He sang ridiculous songs that made Thomas giggle once he was old enough to laugh. "You are a natural father," Flora told him one evening, watching him rock Thomas to sleep. "I am learning as I go," Quentin said softly. "Same as you. But I think we are doing all right, are we not? He seems happy. Healthy. He is perfect. We are perfect. This whole life we built together is perfect." 2 years later, they had a daughter named Lily, tiny and fierce from the moment she entered the world. Lily had Flora's dark hair and determined personality, and she kept them all on their toes once she learned to walk. Then came Matthew 2 years after that. Another boy, easygoing and cheerful where Lily was intense and demanding. The ranch prospered under Quentin's management. He expanded the herd carefully, bought more land when opportunities arose, and earned a reputation as a fair dealer and good neighbor. Other ranchers came to him for advice, and he helped settle disputes before they could escalate into range wars. Flora worked beside him in everything, managing the household finances, helping with the cattle work when needed, raising their children to be strong and kind and unafraid of hard work. In 1890, nearly a decade after that desperate midnight ride to Quentin's ranch, Flora stood on the porch watching her children play in the yard. Thomas was 8 now, tall for his age and already showing signs of his father's leadership. Lily was 6, all wild curls and wilder energy, currently trying to climb a tree despite Flora's earlier instructions to stay on the ground. Matthew was 4, content to dig in the dirt with a stick and talk to himself. Quentin came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about? How different my life is from what I imagined it would be. If someone had told me 10 years ago that I would be standing here, on a successful ranch in Nebraska, married to the love of my life with 3 beautiful children, I would have thought they were crazy. No regrets." Flora turned in his arms to face him properly. The years had added some silver to Quentin's dark hair and a few lines around his eyes, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. More importantly, he was still the best man she had ever known, constant in his love and his principles. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "That night when Sheriff Marston told me to leave town, I thought my life was ending. I thought I had lost everything and had nowhere to go. But really, it was just beginning. He pushed me right toward the best thing that ever happened to me. Toward you. I am the lucky one," Quentin said, his blue eyes intense. "You brought love and laughter and purpose into my life. You gave me a family. You made this ranch a home instead of just a piece of land to defend. Every single day, I wake up grateful that you rode up to my door that night." "Then we are both lucky," Flora said, and kissed him, still feeling that same spark she had felt the first time their lips met in the corral 9 years ago. "Mama, Papa, look," Lily called from the tree, having successfully climbed to the lowest branch despite all instructions to the contrary. "I am the queen of the world. Get down from there before you break your neck," Flora called back, but she could not keep the laughter from her voice. "She is just like you," Quentin observed, grinning. "Stubborn and brave and absolutely determined to do whatever she has decided needs doing. She is going to give us gray hair before we are 40. Probably, but I would not have it any other way." That evening, after the children were in bed and the ranch was settling into quiet, Flora and Quentin sat on the porch in the rocking chairs they had bought 2 years earlier. The Nebraska prairie stretched endlessly around them, silver under the moonlight. Somewhere out there, Red Cloud continued as it always had, probably still under the Marstons' influence though with less power now that territorial laws had strengthened and corruption was harder to hide. Flora rarely thought about Red Cloud anymore. That place and that time felt like another life, something that had happened to a different, younger version of herself. The frightened woman who had ridden through the night seeking help from a stranger had transformed into someone confident and strong, sure of her place in the world. "Do you think the children understand how lucky they are?" Quentin asked, breaking the comfortable silence. To grow up with so much love and security? To never doubt that they are wanted and cherished. I think they will understand better when they are older and can look back with perspective. Right now, they just accept it as normal, which is exactly how it should be. They should think love is normal. Safety is normal. Parents who would do anything for them is normal. We will make sure they never take it for granted, though. Make sure they understand the importance of fighting for what is right, standing up for people who cannot stand up for themselves. Just like their father taught me, Flora said softly. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Thomas grew into a fine young man who attended university back east, studying agricultural science so he could return and help modernize the ranch. Lily became a schoolteacher in Red Cloud itself, taking great pleasure in working in the town that had once driven her mother out. Matthew surprised everyone by becoming a veterinarian, setting up practice in a town 50 miles north and serving all the ranchers in the region. All three children married for love, having learned from their parents' example that nothing else mattered half so much. They gave Flora and Quentin grandchildren who filled the ranch house with noise and joy during holiday visits. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1901, Quentin took Flora on a trip to Denver, leaving the ranch in Thomas's capable hands for a week. It was the first time they had been truly alone together since before the children were born, and they reveled in it, staying in a fine hotel and eating in restaurants and going to the theater. "This is wonderful," Flora said one evening, dressed in a new gown Quentin had insisted on buying her. "But I miss the ranch. I miss our bed and our porch and watching the sunrise over the prairie." "I know exactly what you mean," Quentin agreed. "Shall we go home tomorrow instead of staying the full week? You would not mind?" "Flora, I have been home every moment I have been with you, whether that was on the ranch or here in Denver or anywhere else in the world. You are my home. You always have been." After 20 years of marriage, words like that still had the power to make Flora's throat tight and her eyes sting with tears. "How do you still make me feel like that girl who rode up to your door in the middle of the night? Because you are still her. Braver now, stronger, more certain of yourself. But still the same woman who refused to let injustice break her, who chose to fight instead of surrender. That is who I fell in love with, and that is who I love more with every passing year." They went home the next day and never regretted cutting their trip short. The ranch welcomed them back, familiar and beloved, the place where they had built their life together through hard work and determination and, above all, love. In 1910, on a warm September evening very much like the one when Flora had first arrived at the ranch 29 years earlier, she and Quentin sat on the porch watching the sunset. They were older now, in their early 50s, with gray hair and faces marked by time and weather. But the love between them burned as brightly as ever, perhaps even brighter for having weathered decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. "Do you remember that night I rode up here, desperate and afraid with nowhere else to go?" Flora asked. Quentin took her hand, his fingers still strong and sure. "I remember everything about that night. The way you stood in the lamplight with your chin raised even though you were terrified. The sound of your voice telling me you would not let injustice break you. The moment I knew my life was about to change forever. Mine too. Sheriff Marston thought he was punishing me when he told me to leave town by sunrise or face consequences. But really, he gave me the greatest gift imaginable. He pushed me toward you, toward this life, toward everything I never knew I wanted but could not live without now. The consequences turned out to be love," Quentin said, smiling, "and a ranch full of children and grandchildren, and a partnership that has lasted nearly 30 years. I would say you faced those consequences admirably." Flora laughed, that same bright laugh that had first made Quentin's heart skip so many years ago. "The best consequences I could have imagined. No regrets, Quentin. Not a single one." "No regrets," he agreed, and kissed her as the sun disappeared below the horizon. painting the Nebraska sky in shades of crimson and gold. Their grandchildren would later say that Flora and Quentin Bradford had one of the great love stories of their time, a testament to the power of standing firm in the face of injustice and recognizing true love when it arrived unexpectedly in the middle of the night. But to Flora and Quentin themselves, it was simply their life, built day by day through hard work and dedication, and above all, the unwavering commitment they had made to each other that night when a frightened woman rode up to a stranger's door seeking help and found instead her destiny. The ranch continued to prosper, passing eventually to Thomas and then to his children, remaining in the Bradford family for generations. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original structure remained at its heart, a testament to the foundation Quentin and Flora had built. And always, the story was told to each new generation, about how their great-grandmother had been told to leave town by sunrise or face the consequences, and how those consequences had turned into the greatest love story any of them had ever known. Flora lived to be 73, passing peacefully in her sleep with Quentin holding her hand, surrounded by children and grandchildren who mourned her deeply but celebrated a life fully lived. Quentin followed her just 6 months later, unable to live long without the woman who had been his partner and his love for more than 40 years. They were buried on the hill behind the barn, next to Quentin's father, overlooking the land they had defended and nurtured and loved. And if sometimes, in the early evening when the light turns golden and the prairie wind whispers through the grass, ranch residents claim to see 2 figures sitting on the old porch in rocking chairs, holding hands and watching the sunset together, no one doubts the story. Because love like that, love built on courage and justice and unwavering commitment, does not simply end. It becomes part of the land itself, woven into the very fabric of the place where it flourished, enduring as long as the prairie endures, forever and always.